to poke the bear, to stir up a hornet's nest, to open a can of worms. The opposite of letting sleeping dogs lie? Yep, we're going for it. Hello everybody and welcome! If you visit any part of the Kerbal Space Program community, a common theme nowadays is that KSP2 sucks, and if you are of a different opinion, especially if you're a content creator like myself, you must be a shill and potentially paid by the game's publisher. If only. Let's be real for a second. Kerbal Space Program 2 in its current early access iteration is objectively far behind the huge expectations of the community. Many key features like science and heat management are still missing, and despite some massive patches that fixed hundreds of issues, there are still some game-breaking bugs and general problems that need a solution. And there's also the debate whether or not they should have charged $50 for a game in this state, which is a business argument, not a development one. But I stand by what I said in my initial video on the early access version of the game. I believe there's a potential for greatness in KSP2, a diamond in the rough as I put it. So yes, even in the state the game is in now, there are some things that elevate it above its predecessor. And as always, what follows next are my opinions on the game and these items I talk about. Your mileage may vary, so please let me know in the comments what your thoughts on my selections are and if there are things that you believe KSP2 does better than the original. So here's 5 things Kerbal Space Program 2 does better than the original. Loading times. If you ever loaded up KSP1, you will have had time to make some coffee, grab a bite to eat, and then finally start playing around with some rockets. On the flip side, KSP2 loads up in less than a minute or something like that. I mean, this is something you should expect from a game developed more than a decade after the original, but nevertheless it was a very welcome surprise for me when the game loaded up as fast as it did. Not wasting the player's time should always be high up on the priority list for any developer. Which kind of leads us to my next item. One editor to rule them all. If you ever built a vehicle in Kerbal Space Program, you know that there are 2 different locations where you can do that. The vehicle assembly building and the spaceplane hangar. Both have different size restrictions and different camera controls. Me? I often start designing rovers or planes in the hangar and then switch to the VIB to attach a launch vehicle to get it into space somehow. KSP2 does away with that and concentrates vehicle construction into one singular building. Based on what type of cockpit or crew capsule you start with, the game offers you vertical or horizontal orientation for the main camera perspective. The building is also a lot bigger than the original VAB. I mean, I'm known for my humongous creations and I have not yet had a problem with the available space in this building. There are of course some issues with how stuff behaves inside, and discussion whether or not the camera controls are any good how they are at the moment. But in general, having just one building to cater to all your craft building needs is a plus in my book. Let's stick with creating vehicles for a while and talk about Procedural Wings. Yes, I am aware there are mods for the original KSP that offer this functionality. Nevertheless, if we talk about the stock experience, having wings created procedurally enables players to create stuff that just would not have been possible before. One of my own examples is this Batwing I built a few weeks ago. Not only does it look great, if I might say so, it also glides really well. So yeah, having procedural wings is definitely something that elevates spaceplane building in KSP2 above how it works in the first game. I don't think that anyone would regard this feature being a positive addition as controversial, but I think there will be a lot of backlash regarding my next item. The Flight UI. Oh boy, I can almost smell the comments that this is going to cause, but please hear me out first before your keyboard warrior reflexes take over. New or different is not necessarily bad. Since I have switched a lot between KSP1 and KSP2 lately, I came across multiple situations where the sequel has solved the problem a lot better than the original. And yes, the main flight UI is one of those things. In KSP1 I have to gaze up and down between navball and altitude indicator to check how far I am away from an unintentional litho braking. Same goes for the vertical speed indicator. The information is very tightly packed in KSP2's UI, and I caught myself searching for info in KSP1 that I had in one place in the sequel. Also, check this out. The bright green letters of the maneuver info on the right-hand side of the navball in the original are barely legible or even illegible at all in certain situations. I never ran into that problem with KSP2. And yes, having the staging element on the same side of the screen in the VAB as well as during flight also makes things easier. Is it flawless? Far from it. I myself am not a fan of that pixelated retro style for the icons, and there are still a lot of things the maneuver indicator needs to improve, like showing me the delta V still required for a certain burn instead of displaying the starting amount the entire time. And when in map view, I really wish they would differentiate current and upcoming orbits with different colors like KSP1 did. Which technically does not relate to the flight UI, but to the map view, but still. With all its shortcomings, I already prefer how KSP2 has solved this interface problem compared to the original, so I can fly around with ease. But let's go a bit further away, where we're not just flying in our atmosphere. We are in space. Interplanetary travel. This is exactly one of these your mileage may vary situations I mentioned in the beginning. And yes, there is still the annoying bug that causes orbits to decay around planets or moons. But if you're a veteran of Kerbal Space Program, you will surely have encountered this problem. You have set a precise encounter with a target. You time warp until you want to reach your location, and suddenly your encounter is either gone or has changed to something completely different from when you started your journey. It's a constant source of frustration. If you check out my latest KSP1 video where I started building a museum for special vehicles from my channel's history, link is up top or in the description, there's an example of this right there. My encounter with Mimus just disappears. With all the problems that KSP2 undoubtedly has, I never had this happen to me in the sequel. Execute your maneuver, set up your encounter, and you can trust that physics happens as physics should. Usually. Because as we have seen until the recent hotfix, some types of trajectories were just not possible. But yes, those that were possible behaved a lot more stable than they did in KSP1. Alright, that was my list of 5 things that KSP2 does better than KSP1 right now. And no, this list is not exhaustive. There are a couple of other things I believe are better than in the original, but I did not want to bloat this video too much, and even those above are already very much down to personal preference. So again, your experience and assessment of the current situation of KSP2 might deviate quite a bit from my own. I will gladly discuss all of this with you in the comments down below or over on my Discord server. Link is in the description again. But what I will not engage with are comments that are just spreading pure negativity. If you have a legitimate criticism, and of those there is plenty, I'm sure, let it out. But don't attack anyone's person or integrity, including the developers, just because a bunch of bits and bytes didn't meet your high expectations. However justified those expectations might be after a years-long hype campaign around KSP2. And with that, I have to say I'm looking forward to the first feature update for Kerbal Space Program 2, since I really want to get some science done. Oh, and re-entry heating. And a lot of other stuff. We'll see when we get there.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.